No matter where you are in life, State Farm can help. From protecting your car and home to helping you provide for college and retirement. Find your agent at statefarm.com. Welcome back into Drennan Live here on SportsTime Ohio as the Browns gear up for their second preseason game. That means the NFL season is right around the corner. Also, your fantasy football drafts getting closer. So to help you with all of that, we have Ryan Fowler of FoxSports.com, our fantasy football expert who will help you with all of your draft fantasy football needs. Thanks for joining us, Ryan.
Got it.
So we'll continue our positional breakdowns. Last week we went quarterback, kicker, defense. So today we're going to focus on the tight end position and running back. And with that, we'll start with the running back position. Very important, obviously, in drafts. So where do you target those and who's at the top of your list?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on your scoring league. Again, we kind of go back to that. Is it standard? Is it PPR? And because, again, the league has turned so pass-friendly, a lot more wide receivers there in the first round than even 5 years ago, where a lot of running backs were coming off the board. But not only is it a pass-friendly league, which has hurt running backs in the first round, but there is a lot of risk involved in a lot of these running backs. I mean, it was just a year ago, Todd Gurley was returning from an ACL injury, and a lot of people pumped the brakes and said, I'm not taking a rookie running back coming off of a major knee injury until the fourth or fifth round. Now he's a top pick. Him and David Johnson are floating around as top 5 picks, both in PPR and in standard, because, again, no matter the scoring format of your league, you still need to start 2 running backs in most formats. So, again, Todd Gurley, David Johnson, and then the conversation kind of gets interesting. A lot of people were big on Devonta Freeman last year, rightfully so, because, again, Devonta Freeman had some monster games after Tevin Coleman went down in the first few weeks with a cracked rib. Adrian Peterson, a lot of miles on that card there, and a lot of people think he's going to falter and regress a little bit despite leading the league in rushing last year. And then Ezekiel Elliott, the Ohio State product. I think, again, if you get Ezekiel Elliott 5th or 6th overall, that is a perfect spot for him running behind that offensive line there in Dallas, where Darren McFadden just ran for 1,000 yards last year, and then we know what DeMarco Murray did 2 years ago. So that kind of rounds out the top picks. And then I think after that, you're going to see a lot of wide receivers drafted in the 2nd and 3rd, and maybe even the 4th round. And then there's this 2nd and 3rd tier of running backs that have a lot of people nervous. Health concerns, people coming off of injuries like a Jamal Charles and Matt Forte, and some of those guys over the age of 30 doesn't help their stock either. So I think after you hit that top tier of those names I mentioned, then you're going to see a lot of wide receivers come off the board.
Obviously, there's always a question when you go into the beginning of the season. So you mentioned Ezekiel Elliott as, a rookie guys or, when you should get these guys. But is there anyone right now that you can look at that you really tell the fans to steer clear of who you think may be a big bust, which happens a lot in that running back position?
Yeah, and I'm going to go to Baltimore. One of my most popular storylines of this week is the Baltimore backfield, and it's not so much a bust. It's just I don't know, and I don't think a lot of people know who's going to become the workhorse there. Justin Forsett was a great fantasy option 2 years ago. Last year, the Baltimore Ravens fell apart. Injuries all over the place. Flacco, Smith, and Justin Forsett. And now they have Buck Allen there. He had a nice little year last year. Terrence West is having a nice camp, had 2 touchdowns from short yardage last week, the former Browns option, obviously. And then they drafted Kenneth Dixon. The problem is, how do you shake all 4 of those guys out and say, okay, this is the lead back? With that said, Mark Trestman is the offensive coordinator there in Baltimore. And we thought last year that with Mark Trestman and Justin Forsett, because Forsett can catch out of the backfield, Mark Trestman was going to make Justin Forsett Matt Forte 2.0, and it didn't work out that way. So right now, the big thing that I'm looking at is Baltimore staying away from it completely. It's got me nervous. Another situation out in San Diego. People want to say Melvin Gordon is undervalued, and his average draft position right now is somewhere around RB 30. He's the 30th running back coming off the board, and people think that's too low. I don't. I think there's a lot of reasons to be nervous that Melvin Gordon can be a week-to-week guy that you can believe in. With Danny Woodhead there, and Danny Woodhead has been consistent in PPR leagues, Melvin Gordon's got me nervous.
We'll shift over now to the tight end position. What kind of stock you put in that? I mean, I took Gronkowski with my first pick last year. He did great for me, obviously, with Tom Brady. But when you look at that, a guy like a Gary Barnidge, I know we've talked about. But what do you put into that tight end position? How early should they go? Who's your top guy?
Well, we have an interesting development in Rob Gronkowski heading into 2016. Not only is Jimmy Garoppolo going to be the quarterback for the first 4 weeks, and that's a big change, and it could hurt Gronk's value because, again, we know what Tom Brady and Gronk are together. We really don't know what Jimmy G is with Gronkowski. In addition to that, they brought in Martellus Bennett from Chicago. So the popular thought is, and Belichick likes to shake things up. You really don't know who his running back's going to be week to week. Speaking of running back situations, that's more of a quagmire than anything else. But now, if they put Gronk and Martellus on the field at the same time, that could really hurt Gronkowski's bottom line. Not to say that Gronkowski's not an elite tight end and a fantasy darling. I still think he should be drafted, but I'm thinking at the back end of the first round, early second round, because Martellus Bennett, he's going to get his. I don't think he's going to do what he did at his peak in Chicago with Jay Cutler. But the one thing I keep coming back to is Scott Chandler was the second tight end on New England last year, and he scored 4 touchdowns, and he put up some decent yardage. So they got Martellus Bennett for a reason, because Julian Edelman can only do so much. Danny Amendola can only do so much. They have a rookie receiver in Malcolm Mitchell who's dealing with a little bit of an elbow injury, should be back in the next month. I think that Martellus Bennett is going to be part of the passing game, and that's why I don't think Gronkowski is going to post as great a numbers as he has in recent years. After Gronkowski, though, I like Jordan Reed a lot there in Washington. He's going to be a PPR magnet if he can stay on the field. And then Mr. Consistency, the most consistent tight end over the last 5 years has been Greg Olsen down there in Carolina. I like him to stick with that. I wouldn't target Olsen and Reed until after the third round, though.
All right, and you can find all of those lists on foxsports.com/fantasy. Give a breakdown of the players. We also like to open it up to the fans. They can ask you some questions on social media. And first up for you, Ryan, Alan France says, when doing a weekly or daily fantasy football like FanDuel, what position should I spend the most on a lineup for a certain position?
Yeah, now DraftKings and FanDuel, they do have 2 different scoring systems. And the funny thing with FanDuel is they actually involve the kicker, which I'm not a big fan of. But either one, DraftKings or FanDuel, I'm kind of working my way in and then out, and that begins with wide receivers. You're getting a half point per reception there, so wide receivers are going to play a bigger role than I think the rest of the positions. That's not to say you got to balance it out. We know how the budgets work in DFS at this point, but I still think that the value lays within the wide receiver position. Put a lot of money in your wide receivers, and then at the RB positions, you know, you can find those pass-catching running backs. They exist out there. You're going to have a little bit less of a budget, but it is what it is. Then quarterback. I think, again, quarterbacks can be found for a bargain week in and week out. That is one thing that DraftKings taught me last year, is that quarterbacks you can find on a decent budget and invest that in the wide receiver position, and then so on and so forth. But I really do believe that the wide receivers put the butter on that bread.
Brian Lotzenheiser says he's in a keeper league. He needs to keep one of these, Murray from Oakland or Charles, Kansas City.
I'm going to give Charles the edge. I think, again, when Andy Reid has Jamal Charles at full strength, he's going to work him out. I know Charkandrick West and Spencer Ware had roles there last year after Charles went down, but I do like when Charles is, again, he's going to come with risk. A lot of running backs come with risk. And Latavius Murray in standard leagues, I think, can make a little bit of a push on Charles. But in PPR leagues, I like Charles because of the hybrid back where he can catch out of the backfield and do some work with his legs. I give Jamal Charles the edge.
Justin Smith, around what pick should Andrew Luck go? I'm high on him this year, and I'll probably reach a little to get him.
Well, since you're leading the witness, I'll go with you there, sir. I'm going to say third round if you're going to reach, maybe early fourth round. I'm a guy that likes to wait on the quarterbacks until the 5th, 6th round. I don't think Andrew Luck will be there by then. I know a lot of people are big on him coming back from the injury last year. Hopefully the offensive line can block for him. I guess that's the reason I'm a little hesitant to fully support Andrew Luck in 2016. But again, T.Y. Hilton, Dante Moncrief, and they've really cleared out a definitive tight end in Dwayne Allen. I think that'll make things easier for Andrew Luck. So if you're going to reach, probably third, early fourth round.
David, who should I keep as a keeper in my league, Andrew Luck or Andy Dalton? He picked Luck first overall last season.
Okay, I'm going to still give Andrew Luck the nod there. I have bumped up Andy Dalton in recent weeks only because I really think that the one thing people need to know is in Cincinnati, their new offensive coordinator is the former quarterbacks coach, and he's been the quarterbacks coach for the entire time that Dalton has been quarterback. Now he's been promoted to offensive coordinator with Hugh there in Cleveland. So I have bumped up Andy Dalton, but I think Andrew Luck has a few more weapons around him. And again, he has called his number in the past which could open the door for some rushing yards and some scoring touchdowns inside the 5.
Joe DeCesar, I know we just talked about tight ends, but let's rehash that. What round can you take a tight end at? He has Barnage that he had. I know in the late rounds you need to take defense or a kicker. So what rounds for that tight end again for him?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to take Gronk end of the first, early second just to have a chance at him. I think Jordan Reed, based on average draft position, is going to come off in the 3rd round. Greg Olsen probably shortly thereafter, or vice versa. Olsen might go in the 3rd. After that, I think it is really a jump ball. And the one thing I want people to know is there can be value in waiting for a tight end until the 9th or 10th rounds. My colleague John Halpin, who works out of North Carolina, he and I have this conversation often where Eric Ebron's coming off the board late. And Ben Watson there in Baltimore, who had a nice year with New Orleans last year. Zach Miller, who replaces Martellus Bennett as the tight end 1 in Chicago. Those guys can be had in the 8th, 9th, 10th round. So if you want to concentrate on running backs, wide receivers, and quarterbacks earlier on, you can wait on that tight end and still get pretty good value. The thing is, it's Gronk, it's Reed, it's Olsen, and then it's everybody else, and that's why you got to invest that first top 3 pick.
Last one for you comes from Harold Thies, and he would like a sleeper pick because he loves those sleeper picks at receiver, running back, and tight end.
Wow, he's asking a lot. All right. So it's not so much, I think the one thing you're going to learn over the next 2 weeks is these sleepers. There's so much information now. Everything's on the internet. I don't know if it's a sleeper to you, but it might be. I'm going Michael Thomas. I think he's going to have a breakout year for the New Orleans Saints. Right now, his average draft position's the 10th round. I call that a sleeper. So give me Michael Thomas at wide receiver. At running back, man, I really think Arian Foster has a little bit left in the tank, and a lot of people are saying coming off an Achilles, it's hard to do. Possibly true, but I still think Arian Foster is one of those guys where he's going to give it his best, and his best could be better than some of those other guys ranked around the same area. And at tight end, I really do like Zach Miller there with the Chicago Bears. I think Zach Miller could be one of those guys that creeps into the top 12. I did like Ladarius Green of the Pittsburgh Steelers, but he's got an ankle injury, and now he's got these headaches that are coming from concussions. I don't know if he's going to be around. There are even whispers that they might put him on season-ending IR. Ladarius Green had a lot of stock going for him, but I think now it's going to be Zach Miller in my book.
Thanks so much for joining us, Ryan. You can follow him at Fox Sports Fowler. We'll continue to get some questions from the fans for next week. We'll take a look at wide receivers, some bench players. So we'll talk to you next week. Thanks so much.
Take care, Ashley.
Coming up next, we will talk Olympics and the scandal with Ryan Lochte. So don't miss that. That's next here on Drennan Live.